All right, everybody, thanks for attending the webinar. This is the Accelatis Essentials webinar. Today we're going to go over automation nuts and bolts. So we're going to do a quick scrape of automation and what it looks like, the components that make it up. And later we'll probably do a webinar that dives a little bit deeper, but hopefully after this webinar you'll be able to go into that screen with some confidence and understand what's going on and how to build your flows and tasks and all that stuff. The webinar is a 15-minute long session, so we're going to focus just on the things outlined in the PowerPoint presentation and a little live demonstration afterwards. No Q&A after, but we are going to record this. We'll have it up on the web for you, and if you have any questions afterwards, you can always email us. So the quick view of automation, basically you're going to have your Accelatis environment, and then you have the automation module that sits on the environment. So if you have 3 Accelatis environments, you're going to have 3 different sets of automations. They don't cross environments. And inside of your automation module, you are going to have flows. So what is a flow? A flow can be thought of as a container for a series of tasks. And you can execute those flows in a variety of ways. You can schedule a flow to be launched and we'll show you that screen on daily, hourly, certain times. You can manually launch the flow, so you can just go to the automation module and hit a button and it'll run. You can also execute a flow having it be triggered from an alert. So if a health check or a KPI reaches a threshold, something happens in another module, you can actually have it go out and execute a flow depending on what you want. The gleaming example there might be to restart a service, right? So you could do that sort of thing. And you can also start a flow on a command line. We'll go over that on another call, but just know that the possibility is there. The Accelatis host does not even need to be running for this to work. But if you have some other process that spawns a command line, you can launch a flow that way. And then it's important to note that the execution server launches the flow. And what that means here is if you build a new flow, or if you look at flow properties, you've got a number of things here on the tab. And I went ahead and quickly, the label is the name, the description gives you a little more detail. You have a benchmark group, and what that is you can give it a name in there and it will tag user simulations so that you can chart them based on a benchmark group. Security class has to do with users coming in and running the flow or being able to see the flow. If you don't want them to see it, you can change the security class of the user or change it to something specific so that only a particular user has the rights to run in your flow. And then on the other side, the environment, of course, if you have multiple environments in your Accelatis database, you can pick which environment you're running the flow in. You then have available groups, and the groups are Accelatis groups. So when you look at Environment Manager and you see your listing of servers and groups, that's what the available groups is pulling from. And then for each group, you have servers in that group. Now, the server is the execution server. So when you're setting up a flow and you are picking a server here, this is the server that is going to go ahead and run the flow. And then under that, you'll see available applications. So depending on which server you pick, if it's an HFM server, you will see HFM applications under there. If it's a server that's watching JWS, then you will see some Essbase applications under there. So depending on what you pick here, that will set your flow properties. Now, there's a couple other tabs here. There's a schedule tab. And of course, depending on what you pick on the schedule, here you see I have custom to run every 10 minutes. But depending on what you pick down there, you can schedule it to run at a certain time. And then the other tab is variables. We won't cover variables today, but just know that when you pick the variables tab under your flow, you will see a list of variables that are available for that flow. Okay, so now that we've got our flow and the properties that pertain to the flow, the next thing are the tasks that are inside of the flows. So the question, what are tasks? Well, basically a task is just a command or a set of commands that are going to be executed on a server in that Accelatis environment. The tasks, when you set them up inside of a flow, inherit properties of the flow. So when you pick execution server or you pick the group or the application, once you create your task, these properties are automatically picked up by the task, okay? Uh, tasks that are application specific, such as HFM tasks, consolidate and things like that, they need to be run on servers where the program exists, right? So if you were to assign an HFM task to a server that doesn't have HFM on it, obviously it won't work. So just keep that in mind when you're creating your tasks. And also keep in mind that tasks can be assigned to different servers in the same flow. So even though the task will immediately pick up the execution server and the application in the group from the flow, you can go in later and change that. Just because the flow runs, say, on your Windows web server doesn't mean every task underneath it has to be on that same box. You can actually change it so that you can have multiple servers doing different things in the same flow. And I did a quick example here for you to see the flow over on the left-hand side. Let's say the flow is assigned to server 1 as the execution server, and it's got 4 tasks. So the first task, server 1 is going to stop a service. The next task, server 2 is going to do a service restart. Task 3 comes back to server 1, is going to start a service, and then task 4, an email gets sent. So just to understand what's happening in the back, if you look down the list here, what actually happens is server 1, because it owns the flow, will see that, oh, I've got some stuff to do. It goes ahead and it does it. And it understands that, hey, the next server in line is going to be a different server than me. What it actually does is it pops a little record in the database, and it says, hey, server 2 has to do this task. And every once in a while, all the servers will check the database to see if they have anything to do, and server 2 will check the database and say, hey, I've got this thing to do. So server 2 goes ahead, understands what it has to do, it executes that job, and then it goes and writes to the database, says, yep, I'm done. Server 1 will then wait for it to be complete, and it sees, okay, server 2 did its thing, it's complete. What's next? Okay, next thing is I have to do the service restart, and then I have to send this email. And then after that whole process happens, the job history table is updated with the status of everything. So, that's basically the flow and the way that it works, because agents don't talk to each other. They only talk to the database. So it uses the database as a pivot point when you have multiple servers involved in a particular flow. And I just wanted to point out that at any point in this logic, you can tell a task to completely exit the flow or do something different if it fails, but we're not going to cover that today. I just wanted to point it out that this execution could be interrupted by any of that logic. So as a flow is running, you can see it in the job manager, and you can get to the job manager in a couple of different ways. The toolbar under tools, you'll see job manager, and I'll show that to you guys. Or if you are in the automation module, there is a blue icon at the top that you can just click on, and it'll open up job manager so that you can see the real-time stats as far as what's running and what the result is. Once your job is done, it actually gets removed from job manager. So if you were to open up job manager after it's complete, it's blank, so there's nothing running. And at that point, you would want to go to the job history log in order to see the results and all that stuff. And again, I'll show you guys all that. And I wanted to throw up a quick slide for some quick points. At the top here, you'll see some dots over your flows, and they indicate certain things. A red dot over the flow means that you need to save it. It means that you have opened up a task, you've done something to the properties. Maybe you didn't do anything to the properties. Maybe you just opened it and backspaced over a letter and said, oops, and put it back. What the program is going to do is going to say, hey, this person made a change. I'm going to put a red dot up there, and again, the indication there is that you need to save it. And if you see a blue dot next to the flow, it means either that there's a dependency on that flow. In other words, there is a health check or a KPI that is launching that flow as a result of some threshold, or it means that variables are being used, and I'll show you that as well. A couple other quick points. If you right-click in the flow panel, you can add folders to help you organize. And once you add a folder, just right-click over the flow, and you can move it to certain folders or to the root. But I'll I'll show you that as well. And the last quick point I wanted to make, a lot of people let this get by them, but if you use the instance name field of your tasks, you can make your tasks a lot more human readable by putting a name in that makes sense. Here's a send email task. You see it on the bottom left. And this is what it looks like when I add it. And I could make changes to it and put my information in there. And it's just going to look like this. It just says send email, which doesn't mean a whole lot to me. But if I use the instance name to give it some meaningful text, Linux success notification, you'll see that the text underneath the task changes. But it also changes the text that you see in Job Manager and Job History. So when you're creating your tasks, make it a point to go ahead and use the instance name field in order to make it, look correct for you. So here we are in the automation module, and you could see in my automation module I've got a bunch of blue dots over here, and I do have a number of examples for you, but I'll show you maybe this one first. I have something, a flow that says take a Linux action, and it has the blue dot next to it. When I click on the flow, this changes over here, and what I'm looking at here is dependencies, and I can tell that this flow has a dependency on two things here. I've got a CPU percent user, which is a KPI. It's a threshold for a KPI. And this one is a threshold for a KPI for percent processor. So I know that when these reach a certain value, I have configured them to launch this flow. And that is what this blue dot is telling me. I've got some other blue dots in here that are a little bit different. This blue dot, if I click on this flow, there's nothing in the dependencies. But in the variables, I have some variables available to me, and you can see down here that I do have a task that's using a variable. So I know that this blue dot is actually not talking about a dependency, but it's more of a dependency on a variable somewhere. So that's what the blue dot is telling me. If I were to make a change to any of this, I'm going to go ahead and just make a quick change, year, don't mind that change because that actually won't work. My HFM's not connected, but I wanted to show you that I do get a red dot now over my flow, which tells me, hey, you did something and you've got to hit the save button. So keep that in mind, that that's what will happen. I also created a folder in here for you. And you can see this one is just a quick folder. I put this flow in here, but if I want to move another flow into it, I could just right click on the flow, say move to folder, and it gives me a list of my folders. If I wanted to add a new folder, I literally just right click in the white space here. I can add a new folder, and once I click OK, it shows up here. And once the folder is available, then I can go ahead and start adding flows to it. And again, this is just to help organize. And I did want to launch a quick test for us. In this case, I'm just doing an EPM sys registry report, and I want it emailed to me. So if I launch this, okay, it's running on this box, which is why this comes up, but I want to show you that I can open up Job Manager, and I could see the steps that are running. So it's running this, this executable right now. The other two tasks are waiting for that to finish. If I keep hitting refresh, all right, the EPM registry report takes a couple seconds to run. There you go. And you can see the status here change because this is complete. Now I know that it's starting my next thing. And if I hit refresh here, there we go. And now it's the last thing I need to do is kill Firefox because the registry report does that. And then if I hit refresh, notice that everything is gone, which means my job is complete. If I come to job history and hit refresh, now I get a listing of all of my things. I can click on each one and get a little more detail. And as a matter of fact, I could even click on the, because it's a custom script that I executed from here, I can get a little log of what happened. So I could see that when I killed Firefox, it was a success, gives me the PID number and whatever other information normally comes back. So really that is the nuts and bolts of the enterprise automation. I hope I gave you enough information to go in and start doing some stuff. The next session that we're going to do is the Accelatis services and how they communicate with the database and each other. There's always a question of start order and what's actually writing to the database and what's connected where. So we're going to do a nice session that just highlights all of our services and all of our processes to help everybody understand where they talk, where they put the information, and why all that start order stuff is important. Again, thanks guys for attending. We definitely want your feedback and questions. You can email me directly. You can email the general support mailbox. And everybody have a great day. Thanks so much.